I'm so glad that there's a lot of things that I may not know. There's a lot of stuff that I still can't even begin to understand. But if there's nothing else in this life that I know for certain, I know who holds tomorrow.
Oh, yes. So true.
And even in a life like this, when times get rough, I'm so glad to know that He still holds my hand.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Sometimes you don't need a whole lot of loudness to tell you and remind you that He holds you. But once you hear that in your spirit, something ought to set off that He still has you where He wants you. We thank God for this morning, and we thank God for what He is doing in the life of this church, and we thank God for Him showing Himself strong to us in many ways. As I sat here and I've been praying about this since this morning, it seems to me that so many things have occurred in everyone's life over the last week. It starts from the pastor on down. Everybody's had something go on. Amen. And sometimes we tend to get so overwhelmed that we don't always know. Or I should say it a different way, we don't remember to go back to the Lord, not ask why, but ask how am I going to get through this? So if you would turn your Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 19. 1 Kings chapter 19. Beginning at verse number 8. 1 Kings chapter 19. Beginning at verse number 8. First Kings chapter 19. Beginning at verse number 8. When you have to say amen. Amen. 1 Kings chapter 19, beginning at verse number 8. The scripture reads, he got up, speaking of Elijah, he got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." He said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there were there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way." I'm stopping dead in the middle of the verse. You made me sing. I want to talk for a moment about a meeting in the mountain. A meeting in the mountain. Most of us go through life on a daily basis and we say to ourselves, for whatever reason, we say that this day is not going the way that I planned it. We may wake up in the morning, we have expectations like coffee percolating after we have arisen. We hope that nobody is going to call us with any bad news and interrupt us while we're trying to read the paper or get ready for work or anything else. But suddenly it turns into just one of those days. One of those days when everything just goes all haywire. You can't get on track. You don't know why you can't get on track. You feel like everything is up against you. The further into the day you go, people are telling you all kind of crazy stuff, telling you about what JoJo did on the corner and what Lil Ray did over here and why Sister So-and-so's son is still in jail and why life is just so bad. And by the time you get to lunch, you can't even digest your lunch because you feel so bad. Because all you've received is nothing but bad news. You keep on going about your day asking yourself, can I just get to my next destination with nothing bad happening? Unfortunately, you can't do that because somebody else finds you and they tell you more stuff. You ask how they're doing, they give you a medical report. They go down every little thing that's wrong with them. And by the time you get home in the evening, you feel sick, not because you contracted anything, but because you haven't had time to yourself. And now you just all messed up. And you ask yourself, am I the one with the problem? Bombarded with all kind of stuff, and you just can't get on track. Now that's when other people impose upon your life. But what about those days when it has nothing to do with anybody else, and you are struggling to make it through from moment to moment? There are people that are saved, that do believe in Jesus Christ, that do go through serious issues on a daily basis. Some of us in here have become so pious spiritually that we don't realize what it takes for some people in life just to get up in the morning and leave the house. Some people have to struggle with mental issues issues. I'm not talking about stuff that's diagnosed. I'm talking about dealing with things that they feel that they are the only ones that can deal with it. They feel like they can't break through because they're dealing with the demons of the past. It's something that is trying to trail them down and stop them from being all that God intends for them to be. You have no idea what it might take for a person just to get up and get to the church house on Sunday morning. I know you have no idea what I might go through as the pastor, because some people think that it's just that simple. You're the pastor. You got a close relationship with God. It's easy to get up in the morning, get to church, dress up, put on a robe, talk to us, do all this other kind of stuff. But every now and then it takes a whole lot just to get up out of bed, sit on the side of the bed, and just thank God that I could wake up and see another day. Sometimes you have to look at yourself and ask yourself, how did I make it? And then you might as well say, but if not for the grace of God, I couldn't just get on the other side of the bed. Every now and then we have to examine our whole lives and realize that every day is not easy. Every day it may not be as rosy as we want it to be. There are days that is just that difficult. Y'all not going to talk to me today? I'm right on your street apparently. Every day is not simple. And there is nothing wrong with being a saint and acknowledging that things are not easy. That's right. The truth is, you already have attained a certain level of maturity if you honestly say every day is not easy. You're saying to somebody else that if God is not really in the midst of my life, I can't go any further than I am right now. You're saying to me and to the rest of the world, if the Lord is not guiding my steps and not taking me where I need to go, then it's really going to be a hard life that I am trying to live. And it is necessary for everybody, nobody excluded from anything, that we take time not only to thank God for small victories, but that we have enough sense to know when we got to retreat. You see, God is trying to teach some of us not to stay where we've been and not to stay in the position that we've gone through for years, but to move ahead knowing that He is with us. I don't know if you saw it, you probably didn't, but I came in here today, and I'm not going to lie to you, it wasn't that easy this morning. I sat in the office trying to listen to every song I could listen to and sit back and do nothing. But it wasn't until I got in the pulpit now, sat back and heard God in the stillness of a small voice, that everything I was feeling began to melt away. Yes, every now and then you need to hear God, not in a booming voice, not in a deep baritone like James Earl Jones. You need to hear God in such a way that you can differentiate between the noise around you and His Spirit being present with you. Sometimes it's just hard. It's rough. Some of you right now thinking about work tomorrow don't even want to go into work tomorrow because you don't want to deal with the foolishness you left behind. Sometimes it's rough. And sometimes we feel like Elijah. Chapter 19, Elijah just came off the greatest victory he's ever seen in his ministry. He stood on a mountain. Up against 450 false prophets and said, my God is who He says He is. Put your God up against my God and watch what will happen. And Jehovah that we know showed Himself strong. And when He came off the mountain, He should have came off with his head held high, chest out, and almost strutting all the way to the bank. But no, he had his life threatened. It was already bad enough that a king of Israel didn't like it. But that king of Israel was actually a softy compared to his wife who's known as Jezebel. Jezebel got so upset that she said, forget about what the king said. I'm coming for you. I'm coming to kill you and to destroy you. So as the phrase goes, when mama ain't happy, nobody happy. So now Elijah's so scared, not just of her, but the condition that real prophets were getting killed left and right, that he ran away and hid under a tree. And he stood under that tree, and then the Spirit of the Lord came around and said, Elijah, what are you doing? He said, I came here to lay down and die. Isn't it amazing that when God moves, and we see God move in so many strong ways, that every now and then the smallest thing can come into our life to disrupt the victory celebration, and suddenly those that seem strongest go into places of serious weakness. That means that you are not exempt from going through some trouble and every now and then feeling like you want to give up. Here's a man who's a prophet, that everything he spoke from God came to pass. He knows God is able. He knows God is able to do everything he promised. And he went to a tree and said, I quit. Rough day. Hard days, struggling days. Some of y'all in here have been going through some physical ailments right now. And even though you may tell everybody in the world that everything is okay within your soul, in those places that you tell nobody about, you have questioned yourself. Can I go any further? You ain't got to admit nothing up in here, but the truth will actually set you free. If you acknowledge that God is about to break you through to another place, if you can acknowledge just in your own way that there are days that you look at yourself in the mirror and see failure and not the promise of God, come on, we gonna talk real. There's some days that you look in the mirror and for all the promises that God has spoken over your life, you don't see it. For all the greatness that people pour into your life, you look at yourself and you just don't see. You're that broken, but you just can't let folks see it. You're that hurt, but you just will not allow yourself to reveal that. You're too afraid because of future hurt. Folk will abuse your good nature. People will look at you strange as if for some reason you can't trust God now. You will look at yourself and say, I can't put myself out there because the day I do, forget about what I'm feeling now. It's just going to get worse. But God has a funny way of getting us from the tree to his presence. Well, you see, before we get to the selected text, what happened was he was going to stay at that tree. He was in a tree of depression. He was at a place that he did not want to leave. He was ready to give it up. He's not the first person that came to a tree ready to give up. You remember about a son of Abraham named Ishmael, who had a mother named Hagar, and she was sent away into the wilderness with a little severance package. And by the time things ran out, they were in the middle of the desert. She laid her son down by a bush near a tree and said, I'd rather die than go through this anymore. And I'd rather my son die too. And God spoke quickly and said, you may not have been the promise I talked about, but I can't let you die here either. Your son is is going to be great as well. There are times when we come to the tree not for shade, but we come because we come so low that we rather fit in with where we came from. Dust, from dust I came, and back to the earth I shall return. We speak eulogies over our own lives at the tree. But God said, okay, you're going to stay at this tree. Let me feed you. He fed him, gave him something to drink. Day was over. Came back. He was fed again. He drank again. And the day was over. Then he was fed again, drank again. And then the question came back again. Elijah, what are you doing here?
Yes.
He still was hurt. He said, they're coming after me. I don't know what to do. He fed him again, he drank again, and then he left to the mountain. And he found a cave and stayed in the cave overnight. And he found himself in Mount Horeb for 40 days and 40 nights. That sounds kind of familiar to me. For Jesus was in the wilderness fasting and praying for 40 days and 40 nights, and he was messed with and tempted of the devil and tempted to give up who he was and not to follow after what God wanted him to do. Sounds familiar to me. Sometimes God will do whatever he has to do to get you out of your first stage to get you to the next stage. And for Elijah, the next stage was to get into the mountain, the Mount of God. He's in the mountain. He's in the cave, still trying to hide. And the Lord comes back again. The messenger comes back and says, Elijah, what you doing? And Elijah's response still was, they still looking for me. They gonna kill me for being faithful. And the messenger said, come out of the cave. Go to the top of the mountain, for the Lord is about to pass by. And this is the part of the scripture that makes me want to shout. On the mountain, the winds came so strong that they broke rocks. But the writer said, but God was not in the wind. And after the wind came the earthquake. For God said it had to be God. No, the writer said it wasn't him. Wind that can break rocks. Earthquake shook the earth. And then fire came after the earthquake. This got to be God. God wasn't in the fire. Some translation says next that there was a small voice.
Yes, it was.
There was a small.
Yes, small.
There was a quiet whisper. The text in New Revised Standard says after the fire, there was a sound of sheer silence. Translated this way, it was a loud whisper. God wasn't in the earthquake. God wasn't in the fire. God wasn't in the wind. He was in the silent whisper in the still small voice.
Yes, yes.
Then Elijah wanted to retreat one more time. But the question came up one last time. What are you doing? I'm still hiding. And the 15th verse, the 8th part says, the voice told him to go back in the way that you came. When you get up into the mount of God, you are saying to yourself, I need to be in the presence of God in such a way that I need to feel and to know that God is still with me even when I'm in my lowest state. When you go into the mount of God, you don't go up there to climb for the sake of climbing. You don't go for the heck of it. You're going up there with an expectation that God is going to do something in your life that is so radical to what you're going through that when you are through, you're not going to leave like you went up. See, every now and then you need to quit looking at Sunday morning as your only mountaintop experience. You need an experience with the Lord every day of the week. If I'm not around, the deacon's not around, nobody else is around, you ought to have some skills to be able to climb up the mountain and say, Lord, I ain't leaving here until I get what I came for. In his presence is fullness of joy. In his presence is healing. In his presence there's deliverance. In his presence there's hope. In his presence there's peace. In his presence there's healing. In his presence is everything that you need. You don't have to shout with me today. I'll shout for myself because in his presence is the power that I need to go on just a little while longer. It doesn't matter if folk are with me when I go up or when I come down. When I'm in his presence, I find what I need so I can make it just a little while longer. There's some stuff I gotta get to make it. The first thing I need to get is a new experience with God's power. People are looking for the fire of God. People are looking for the shaking from God. People are looking for the wind to blow in their life. But the text says God was not in any of that. It does not dismiss the power of God to do big things, but it reassigns for our mind that when God moves, we ought to be aware of him and not the magnitude of what he does. Ooh, that felt real good. We have to be aware of him and not the magnitude of the things he does. So, the woman with the lost coin, thank you, Jesus, you talking now. The woman with the lost coin shouted off of finding one coin. Not because it was worth as much as we think it was worth, but because of the value that it had with her. So everybody's experience is not going to be a fallout experience at the altar. But if you got your healing in the middle of your house, on your couch, while you were praying, seeking his face, going to the mountain for yourself, you ought to have a shout moment experience.
Yes, Lord, yes.
We've been riding on the same thing we got 20 years ago. Guess what? That's good, but you need a fresh look.
Yes.
Elijah knew about the prophetic word of God.
Well,
He knew about how good God really was. He knew all that. But he needed to know that his God was still in his ear.
yes, yes.
You know what's important about that? When I'm walking into a situation, I need to know that God is there. And sometimes God is not going to reveal himself in some tangible way. He's going to just let me walk. I think the psalmist said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, here's the conviction. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. So what is in front of me are the shadows of death. But what's all around me is the shepherd that won't leave my side. I can only see what's in front of me, but if the shepherd is with me, whether he's in front of me or behind me, I know within myself that he is all around me because he still speaks to me, because his sheep know his voice.
Yes, sir.
He needed a new experience. He wasn't going to get that under the tree. He needed to go where the Lord was.
Yes, sir.
The Lord is not in our pity. He is not in our pity. He is not the source of our pain. But he is the source of our healing. And if our healing is not under the tree, that means we got to go where he is. And we can't find him wallowing in our stuff because he's trying to get us out. Which leads to number 2, you need a new revelation of God's movement in your life.
Yes.
So Elijah saw fire from heaven wipe out 450 false prophets. He saw great movements where God sucked up a sacrifice on the spot because he called on. He saw a famine and a drought happen because he called on the Lord and spoke his word.
Yes.
He saw, big. Let me say it this way. Have you ever been around somebody that big things seem to keep on happening? Like it seemed like one huge thing after another. Not like a series of little, but it's just one thing after another. Just boom, 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 boom. Just. If you ever been around those folk, I've been around those folk, I shout with them because it's like one thing after another. Boom, boom, boom. And then suddenly, same folk still getting blessed by God, but according to them, all of a sudden it seems exponentially smaller than what God was doing initially. And God is still doing what? The same thing. We shout off of the big stuff, but we can't shout off of the normal stuff. What happens when suddenly God ain't doing it so big anymore? And yet we're still blessed and we're favored by God. And we don't shout no more because the big stuff ain't happening. It's the moment when we have to reassess what's happening and we have to recognize that there is a revelation in this. God doesn't bless us just because he wants to give us stuff. He blesses us to remind us that he's there. If you wake up in the morning, why be cranky? Okay, let me say it a different way. Why wake up in the morning and be who you are every day? Yeah, some of y'all cranky in there. I don't even need to be in your house. You know it. Just if it's you, don't have to say nothing. Just say, Lord, forgive me. Why be cranky? I know it's not, if you're physically not that great right now, I get that, you're miserable and all that stuff, but if you wake up in the morning another day, that lets me know that God has another day of healing that he's going to do. Which lets me know also that he has another day of things he wants you to do. Which lets me also know that he is permitting you the chance to do great things even from the position you are. Because here it is, the moment you lose the ability to do anything, that's the moment you should cry. See, the revelation is he looked for God in all the big stuff. That must be God. Look at what the text said. The text did not say that Elijah was really looking. Here's some wiggle room, as we call it. Look at it. The text doesn't say he was searching for God in the big thing. But it also doesn't say that he wasn't trying to discern God in the big things either. We look at things in such a way that we expect to identify them as God. And God is trying to say, don't identify me by the thing. Identify me by the Spirit. And when you identify God by the Spirit and not the tangible, you'll be able to witness God move in ways in your life that you could have never, ever begun to imagine. God doesn't want to always shout. He wants to get your attention. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard God in the midst of your chaos? I mean, distinctly heard him. Not something you heard from back in the day, not something that sounded like someone that told you some good advice. Have you ever heard God in your chaos? I mean, literally, you going through it, and all of a sudden he just says, peace, be still. And you're still looking around at all the stuff, and it's still going crazy, but he wasn't speaking to the situation, he was speaking to you.
Yes. Yes.
All that. Let me go on, because I can stay there 5 minutes. Now let me stay there a minute. Remember when they were on the boat and they said, Lord, don't you care that we perishing and all that stuff? They weren't perishing, they weren't dying, they weren't sinking, nothing was happening, but they saw the situation and Jesus spoke, peace, be still. Yeah, everything in the earth stopped. But I believe Jesus wasn't speaking as much to the winds and the waves as he was speaking to the men on the boat. Now you ought to know. Now let me qualify my statement. Because go a little further, when Jesus spoke to Lazarus to come forth, and he said, Lazarus, come forth, he did that because he had to distinguish between Lazarus and all the other dead people in the graveyard. So when he said, peace, be still, he was telling everything under his control to stop. So if God's speaking to you and he tells you peace, he's being distinct. He's trying to get you under revelation of his movement. He might not stop any of the stuff going on around you, but he'll stop you long enough so you can face the challenge. Last thing I'm through. You have to refocus on your total purpose. Here's what happens next. This whole chapter up to this point is questions. What are you doing, Elijah? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm hiding under the tree. Okay, I'm going to feed you till you come out. He goes to a cave. What you doing? They still looking for me. They looking for me. I got warrants. They looking for me. Running for my life. I ain't done nothing wrong but following you. I followed the Lord. I've been faithful. But I'm running for my life. Come on, get out of the cave. Come to the mountain. Stays in the mountain and all that stuff, and tries to return to the cave and everything. And the voice comes back and says, what? What you doing? You heard what I said last time. I'm hiding. Then the voice says in verse 15, we don't even got to read no further of what he is supposed to do. Here's what it comes. After a while, the Lord stops addressing certain things. Let me say that louder and clearer. After a while, the Lord will stop addressing certain things in your life and get right down to the point. God don't nurse us after a while. He said, okay, I'm going to fed you to get you out of the depression part. Okay, I'm demonstrated that the Lord, he said, I've demonstrated that I'm here. Even in the midst of chaos, I'm here. You heard me, you see, you know I'm here. You trying to go back to this cave? You trying to go back to hide? No. Verse 15. Then the Lord said to him, what? Go. And not go anywhere. Look at what it says. It says, go, return on your way to the wilderness. I think another translation would say, go back the way you came.
Yes. Yes.
If he had to ascend up into a mountain, y'all know how this works, right? You get a mountain range, you have what? Peaks. And what do you have? Valleys. So he was telling Elijah, you got to confront the valley. I'm tired of fooling with you now. I got you from that tree. You were ready to lay it all down and quit. Now I got you out of that. I demonstrated who I am in the midst of chaos. You can't stay here no more. You can't hide here no more. I've given you everything you need. Now, go back the way you came. Which means you got to go back into the valley. Now here's the interesting thing about the valley. When you're on the mountain, you're in rarefied thin air. And if someone wanted to attack you, you are fully exposed. And you are weakened because you have to change or adjust to the lack of oxygen up there. So eventually, you got to come down from the mountaintop, go into the valley. In the valley, the oxygen gets better, your breathing gets adjusted, and guess what? If someone wanted to attack you, you're in a safer place. Now, it's not just, well, peaks and valleys. Guess what? When you go back to the valley, you also have to confront the things you were trying to run from. He's telling Elijah, I'm strengthening you so you can face this challenge, and not only face it, but know that I'm with you in it. If you got to go to a valley, don't get scared of it. He empowered you in his presence in the mountain. Okay. Y'all got real silent. Okay. Okay. Let's close this thing. All this stuff that you've been crying, weeping, fussing, fighting, all that mess, he's telling you straight up, stop hiding from it. Stop hiding from your pain. Confront it. Stop hiding from your hurt. Confront it. Stop hiding from what you really feel on the inside. Confront it. Because when you confront it, one or two things is going to happen. Either you're going down or that thing is going down. But if he's empowered you while you were in the mountain, that means that you can face the challenge, and the challenge has to go down. Past hurt, you got to confront it. Your current situation, confront it. Pastor, I'm not confrontational. If you ever gossip once in your life, of course you're confrontational. If you've ever said anything to anybody's face, yeah, you're confrontational. If someone ever messed up your money at the bank, you showed up for confrontation. But I don't know if that's why he brought you to the mountain. He said, look, if I let you stay in your own condition, yeah, you are going to die. Yeah, you are going to suffer. Yeah, you are going to suffer not because someone inflicted anything on you, but because you settled for the mess of this life to overtake you. But I hear the word say to me, greater is he. Greater is he that is in me. I ain't running. I ain't hiding. Gotta face it. But you only can face it if you go to the mountain. It's time for some of us to start having some regular meetings with God. Sunday morning is not the only meeting he's trying to have with you. It's great to hear, I'll never leave you nor forsake you on Sunday morning, but guess what? Eventually Monday is coming. Tuesday is coming. Wednesday is coming. Thursday, they're coming. And there's no telling what you're going to have to endure. But I promise you, if you go up with him, he will never let you down. He will build you up to face it head on. Amen. God bless you.